Okay, all right. Okay, Andrew, you're first. Good morning. Can you hear the mic? Okay. Good morning and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Minneapolis City Council. My name is Barbara Johnson, President of the Minneapolis City Council. And before our meeting begins, we have a couple of organizations that we would like to recognize and honor today. In the first are the community gardeners that make such a difference in our city. And we're really pleased that we have a community gardening day to announce today. And I'm going to turn the mic over to my colleague, Councilmember Andrew Johnson from Ward 12.
All right, can we have the Gardening Matters folks come on up along with any other gardeners we have here today? I know we have some young gardeners in the audience as well. If you could please come join us. Well, I'm so excited today to be reading and presenting this resolution from the mayor and the city council regarding Community Gardening Day, and it's so exciting to have some young gardeners with us as well. All right. Whereas there are more than 243 community gardens in Minneapolis, in all 13 wards, providing opportunities to more than 5,500 youth and adult gardeners, and whereas there are 194 food production gardens in Minneapolis, and whereas there are over 38 acres of community garden space in Minneapolis, and whereas community gardens build community by crossing cultural and socioeconomic divides by providing cross-cultural and intergenerational opportunities for neighbors to meet and work together, and whereas community gardens add beauty to urban neighborhoods and provide much needed green space in high density areas, and whereas Minneapolis community gardens reflect the cultural and ethnic diversity of the city, including gardeners who speak Dakota, Ojibwe, English, Spanish, Hmong, Somali, French, Vietnamese, Ukrainian, Arabic, Russian, and Korean, and whereas community gardens reduce the urban heat island effect and filter rainwater, helping to keep our rivers, lakes, and groundwater clean. And whereas community gardens provide horticultural therapy and exercise, helping to draw people out of their homes and get active. And whereas community gardens combat inactivity and provide access to healthy food, thereby reducing risk of diabetes and obesity. And whereas community gardens educate neighbors about land stewardship, providing an informal classroom for children and adults to learn skills caring for the natural environment. And whereas community gardens provide an asset that enables our city's children to grow physically, socially, and emotionally through important food and educational programs such as Youth Farm. And whereas community gardens enhance crime prevention efforts and improve property values. And whereas community gardens provide a more livable environment in Minneapolis and present a positive local image to a community's residents and visitors. And whereas the city of Minneapolis is proud to support community gardens by providing compost via Public Works Solid Waste and Recycling Department, and by providing access to water through the Public Works Water Treatment and Distribution Services Division. And whereas the Minneapolis Department of Health continues to support the local food resources hub to link residents, gardeners, and entrepreneurs with the seeds, seedlings, tools, education, and connections needed to build food, growing, preservation, distribution, and composting skills. And you see how much community gardens do for us. And whereas community gardens and urban farms help promote local abundance of healthy, fresh food and generate opportunities for employment and new enterprise development. Whereas community gardens and urban farms provide rich opportunities for adults and young people to learn to grow their own food and become active stewards of environmental health and ecosystem restoration while co-creating local food systems. And whereas community gardens and urban farms actively involve many step-up summer youth interns throughout the city of Minneapolis each year, providing work experience, engaging youth, and making a difference in their communities and preparing our next generation of environmentally responsible urban leaders. And whereas Community Garden Day will take place in the Twin Cities metro area on September 13th, giving residents an opportunity to learn about community gardens and visit gardens in their area. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Minneapolis that the City of Minneapolis recognizes the role community gardens play in making our city more livable, attractive, resilient, and healthy. Be it further resolved that the City Council and the City of Minneapolis declares September 13th, 2014 as Community Garden Day in the City of Minneapolis.
Anyone want to say anything? Sure.
My name is Margaret, and I am organizing Community Garden Day with Gardening Matters. And this is my son, Leo, who loves Thomas the Tank Engine, so pardon his train commentary. We are just very thrilled to be here and to be recognizing the thousands of community gardeners that contribute to community gardens across the city of Minneapolis each year. These are volunteer-run gardens, people putting in their sweat and muscle power and resources into these spaces to make their communities more livable. And they're inviting you into their gardens on September 13th, which is Saturday. They're going to be hosting free public celebrations across the city and actually across the Twin Cities metro area. You can look for more information on our website. It's at gardeningmatters.org. We've got a full event directory there, but they're going to be fun events where you can just wander in and learn more about the spaces near you. And we look forward to seeing you there. And just thank you to the city and all of the city council members here for the support that you all provide to your community gardens. Without you, we couldn't go as nearly as far as we've gone today. So thank you.
Sure. If people want to come closer, if someone wants to take a photo.
Get a quick picture.
Well, and, you know, I just want to give a shout out too to our CPED staff. This year, we actually broadened the availability of lots for community gardens to include areas that have been damaged by the tornado in North Minneapolis, and our CPED staff worked very, very hard to make sure that the policies were in place to allow that to happen, and we had a great expansion of community gardens in North Minneapolis because of their great work. So thank you, CPED staff. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And now we have cooperatives. Councilmember Reich. And now I'm joined by Councilmember Kevin Reich, who has a resolution honoring the cooperative movement.
Thank you, Madam President. We sometimes even take for granted the cooperative movement in Minneapolis because it's so pervasive. It's so much a part of almost every corner of the city, and we have so many different types. But today, we want to recognize a very important week that's coming up where our local recognition can be joined by national recognition. And that is because the week of September 8th, 2014 marks the first time the National Cooperative Business Association Purchasing Cooperative Conference and the annual Cooperative Conference will be held concurrently. As a result, leaders of every sector of the cooperative movement from across the nation will be gathered in Minneapolis, including the keynote speaker and president of the International Cooperative Alliance, Dame Pauline Green. So a very great honor for our city. Minneapolis, as we know, is an ideal location for such a momentous event of this gathering of this magnitude because the cooperative movement is so strong historically and currently in our state. A number of the cooperatives that have had their first beginnings here in the state of Minnesota and the laws that support them, we were pioneers in that. The city of Minneapolis itself was a pioneer and certainly very active, going way back to the 1870s with the Coopers Union, and now we have one of the nation's first cooperative breweries in the making. So in 100 years we went from barrels to beer and everything in between through the cooperative efforts. In addition to that, we have now an emerging cooperative real estate, commercial real estate investment group, Northeast Investment Cooperative, one of the first in the nation to do that and one of the first actually in the side of the hemisphere to take community empowerment to the next level. I'd like to ask Tom Pearson, the board member of North Country Cooperative Fund and the Cooperative Works, as well as the people who are associated with different groups in our local cooperative network. If you'd please come up. Spread it out. Tom, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Thank you for bringing this resolution. And as you mentioned, cooperatives are not only strong here, but for the education of people here, but also the council, cooperatives are operating in every sector of the world economy. And they're also in nearly every country in the world. So this is not just a small business model. It's not just a quaint community development model. It's actually serious business. One thing that I want to differentiate for folks to understand cooperatives is that ultimately these businesses are powered by the people that are within them and the values that are behind them. So you can distinguish cooperatives from other businesses by looking at these values that are underpinning their operation. And just to share three examples: solidarity, equity, and self-help. And we don't just use these values as footnotes in our annual reports. They're actually the very basis of our best practice. And so that's how you can identify cooperatives in our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And perhaps people can identify themselves and the group they most associate with today.
I'm Chris Bubser. I represent the Northeast Investment Cooperative and I think probably the East Side Food Cooperative as well today. The Northeast Investment Cooperative is what you mentioned earlier, the first of its kind in the nation real estate cooperative. We've taken a blighted building on Central Avenue and in less than a year turned it into 3 businesses and 30 jobs.
I represent Seward Cafe, a worker-run cooperative at 2129 East Franklin Avenue. We're in solidarity with Hard Times Cafe, Bone Shaker Books, and Grease Pit Bicycle Collective. All right.
I'm Benjamin Sy with the Hub Bike Co-op, and we have 4 full-service bike shops in South Minneapolis.
I'm Wendy Thorne with Worth Cooperative and Grocery. We're trying to bring healthy food into North Minneapolis, and we might almost be there. We might actually have a site. So thanks for being here, everybody.
I'm Marvin Lexterkamp, and I was representing from the former North Country Co-op, and I'm also working now on a new co-op that's maybe going to form for senior housing.
My name is Allison Meyer. I represent Seward Community Co-op at 2823 East Franklin Avenue.
I'm Kit Fordham. I represent the Riverton Community Housing. I'm the manager of cooperative services. We do student housing in Dinkytown. And we actually just broke ground on our next project at 1227 4th Street. So you'll notice it if you drive through Dinkytown. Thank you.
I'm Emily Lipple-Cheney. I'm with North Country Cooperative Foundation today, and we help people develop cooperatives all over the upper Midwest.
I'm Joe Getzky, also with Riverton Community Housing.
Joe Riemann. I'm on the board of Seward Co-op and the director of cooperative business development for North Country Cooperative Development Fund.
Christina Jennings, and I'm with North Country Cooperative Development Fund, and we're a national community loan fund that works exclusively with cooperative businesses and housing, and we've supported more than 950 cooperatives around the country in 30 states over the last 36 years.
Thank you. Just a small sampling of the variety of businesses that are supported by the cooperative model. And with that, I'll read the resolution. The resolution of the City Council, all members signing on, recognizing the week of September 8th, 2014 as Cooperatives Week. Whereas Minnesota has been home to the cooperative businesses since 1860, including agricultural, electrical, newspaper, and retail co-ops, and today leads the nation with over 1,000 cooperatives employing nearly 42,000 people. And whereas Minnesota has a long history of legislation supporting cooperatives, beginning with Governor Floyd B. Olson in 1933 and continuing through and sponsored by Gary DeCramer in 1989, and adoption of the 2003 Minnesota Cooperative Associations Act, Minnesota Chapter 388. And whereas the cooperative businesses first played a role in the city of Minneapolis' economy in the 1870s, when Coopers formed the first barrel-making cooperatives to serve the city's flour milling industry. And whereas the local cooperatives established in 1930, including Group Health Mutual, now known as Health Partners, and Chateau Co-op Dining Club, later known as Chateau Student Housing Cooperative, helped people in Minneapolis to endure and cover the Great Depression. And whereas a new wave of cooperative businesses emerged in the city of Minneapolis in the 1970s with the establishment of co-ops such as North Country Co-op, Seward Community Cafe, and Park Cooperative Apartments, and whereas Minneapolis is home to dozens of cooperative businesses in the sectors of food, childcare, credit unions, financial services, healthcare, housing, real estate development, recreation, and more, and whereas the United Nations supports International Cooperative Day, designated 2012 as the International Year of Cooperatives under the unifying theme, Cooperative Enterprises Build a Better World, and whereas the cooperative business model has demonstrated its unique utility as a tool for economic empowerment of individuals and communities through creating access to capital, resources, and employing a collaborative decision-making process and incorporating the principles of concern for community, and whereas the National Cooperative Business Association's 2014 Purchasing Cooperatives Conference and Annual Cooperative Conference are being hosted in the city of Minneapolis, September 8th through 11th, now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Minneapolis that we proclaim the week of September 8th, 2014, the Cooperatives Week. Thank you for being here.
I'm going to call this regularly scheduled meeting of the Minneapolis City Council to order. Clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Warsame.
Present.
Goodman.
Present.
Fry.
Here.
Palmisano.
Here.
Gordon.
Here.
Kano.
Here.
Reich.
Here.
Bender.
Here.
Glidden.
Here.
Yang.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Quincy.
Here.
President Johnson.
Here.
There are 13 members present.
We have a quorum present, all members present this morning. Next item is adoption of the agenda. Any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, a motion to approve the agenda be in order.
Move adoption.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in approval say aye. Aye. Opposed, that carries. Next, we have acceptance of the minutes of the adjourned meeting held August 14th, 2014, and the regular meeting and adjourned session held August 15th, 2014.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Next, we have referral of petitions and communications and reports of the city officers to proper committees and departments.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Next, we have the Community Development and Regulatory Services Committee report, and that committee is chaired by Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam President. The Community Development and Regulatory Services Committee is bringing forward 14 items for approval this morning. Notable items include item number 1, which is the city's 2013 Consolidated CAPER report to HUD. Item number 3, which is a change that will allow distilleries to operate and sell liquor that they distilled on their own premises. I'll also note that the construction management agreement is in front of us, and item number 10, as well as the Children's Healthcare, Children's Hospitals Clinic refinancing of $56 million in 501c3 tax-exempt refunding revenue bonds. With that, I'll move items 1 through 14 for approval this morning.
Councilmember Goodman has moved the Community Development and Regulatory Services report. Anyone have any concerns about any of those items or want to pull anything off for discussion? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Warsami.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Fry.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Glidden.
Aye.
Yang.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Quincy.
Aye.
President Johnson.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That report is adopted. Next, we have the Health, Energy, and Community Engagement Committee, and that committee is chaired by Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, Madam President. The Health, Environment, and Community Engagement Committee is bringing one item forward. It's to extend our maternal and child home visiting program by amending the contract with the Minnesota Department of Health to extend the termination date by 6 months and accept an additional revenue amount of $60,000 for home visiting services for women and young children. And I will move that forward for approval.
Councilmember Gordon has moved the Health, Environment, and Community Engagement report. Anyone want to pull anything off or discuss any of the items? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Warsami.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Fry.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Glidden.
Aye.
Yang.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Quincy.
Aye.
President Johnson.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That report is adopted. Next, we have the Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management report, and that committee is chaired by Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Madam President. We have 5 items. The first item is to authorize acceptance of the Minnesota Board of Firefighter Training and Education Redistribution Funding under the Round 6 Training Reimbursement Program in the amount of $48,960. The second item is to authorize acceptance of the 2014 Emergency Management Performance Grant Award in the amount of $30,000. The third item is to authorize issuance of a new request for proposals for health club memberships, fitness and wellness services, and facility use for the MPD, the MFD, and the Minneapolis Parks and Rec Board Police Department. The fourth item is to authorize a contract with the University of Minnesota in the amount of $20,200 for Minneapolis Police Department to provide bomb unit and K-9 unit security at football games held at TCF Bank Stadium. And the fifth item is to accept a single bid of Uniforms Unlimited for an estimated annual expenditure of $130,000 for the conducted energy device or tasers for the MPD. And with that, I will move all items for approval.
Councilmember Yang has moved the Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management report. Anyone want to pull anything off or discussion on any of those items? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Warsami.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Fry.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Glidden.
Aye.
Yang.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Quincy.
Aye.
President Johnson.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That report is adopted. Next, we have the Transportation and Public Works report with that committee's chair, Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam President. Transportation Public Works Committee forwards 8 items today. Item 1 is the passage of an ordinance amending Title 11, Chapter 225 of the Code relating to health and sanitation, garbage and refuse, expanding the authority of the Public Works Division Solid Waste and Recycling to provide cleanup and charge for excessive solid waste at residential properties more than 4 dwelling units and non-residential properties in the city. Item 2 is to authorize conveyance of land from the University of Minnesota to the City of Minneapolis at no cost to the city for a permanent street easement needed to construct a cul-de-sac extension at the conjunction of 8th Street Southeast per that project. Item 3 is to authorize execution of an amendment to the term of the joint cooperative agreement for the Bassett Creek Watershed Management Commission, extending the term to January 1st, 2025. Item 4 is to authorize execution of a permission to use Metro Transit property letter of agreement to allow the city use of the property owned by Metro Transit at 834 North 7th Street for snow storage. Item 5 is to approve a special boulevard permit application submitted by the riverfront parking ramp at 212 9th Avenue South to pave the boulevard on two sides of the building with pervious pavers. The next two items will be referred to the Ways and Means Committee. Item 6 is authorize $12,500 to be expended from the Public Works operating budget to allow 2014 participation in the Minneapolis-Duluth Superior Passenger Rail Alliance Board for the development of the Northern Lights Express. Item 7 is to accept a low bid of Global Specialty Contractors Incorporated for Bridge 9 rehabilitation. Item 8 is a report from the adjourned meetings of August 19th and August 27th, and it's regarding the Southwest Light Rail Transit Project. And there's 4 action items included in that with the following: authorize execution of a memorandum of understanding between the City of Minneapolis and the Metropolitan Council on the proposed redesign of a portion of the Southwest LRT project. Passage of a resolution approving the physical design component of the preliminary design plans of the Southwest Corridor Light Rail project submitted to the City by the Metropolitan Council on July 10th, 2014, to fulfill the requirements of the Minnesota Statute Section 473394, Subdivision 3, and direct the City Attorney and Director of Public Works to monitor the progress of the supplemental draft environmental impact statement to that project line and to update the City Council with new information or in the event of further delays. The current date of the release of the SDEIS estimated by the Metropolitan Council is January 2015. And the final action is to direct the Intergovernmental Relations Department to convene appropriate staff from Public Works, Community Planning and Economic Development, Civil Rights, the City Coordinator, Mayor's Office, City Council offices to complete the development of a written response by the City to equity concerns and ideas, and to report back to the Transportation Public Works Committee September 9, 2014. Madam Chair, I move all items for consideration.
Okay, Councilmember Reich has moved all of the Transportation and Public Works report items. So they're all before us, and I'm sure there'll be some discussion on some of them. So I'm going to pull off item 8. I'm sure people will want to discuss. Any comments? Okay, then let's act on items 1 through 7. Clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Warsami.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Fry.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Glidden.
Aye.
Yang.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Quincy.
Aye.
President Johnson.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
Those items are adopted. On item 8, is there discussion? This is the item about the Southwest Light Rail Transit project. Any discussion by council members?
Kevin's going to.
Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, Madam President. I'm happy to go first.
Okay.
And expect that those supporting the project will do a great job of hitting all my points when you speak. Large-scale public works projects clearly pick winners and losers. I've been told by DFL elected officials at levels outside of ours. Clearly, your constituents are the losers in this case, I've been told. Thank goodness they can afford it. That's a comment that was made to me by another DFL elected official in the context of this Southwest LRT debate. And what I want to talk about today is whether or not we can afford it. I don't think that we can afford the environmental risk that this project poses at this time. This alignment jeopardizes the quality of life in Minneapolis parks and lakes, and this is what distinguishes us from all other cities in our region. In 2007, Minnetonka and Eden Prairie opposed Southwest LRT because of the alignment and the way it went through a wetland in their area. And they negotiated a $300 million settlement with the Met Council to ensure that that alignment didn't go forward. Since the early 1970s, federal and Minnesota law has required a thorough environmental review of major construction projects such as the one in front of us today, where there is significant environmental potential harm. This review must occur prior to decisions being made by governmental bodies like us today, and it could bias the objectivity and thoroughness of the environmental review. Minnesota regulations in particular require the responsible government unit to decide on the scope of environmental review at the beginning of the process. That decision must identify, amongst other things, the issues to be addressed in the environmental impact statement. A DIS for the Southwest LRT project was completed in the fall of 2012. At that time, 7 alternatives were under consideration for Southwest LRT, which included 3 strategies for dealing with the Kenilworth corridor if one of the build alternatives was chosen: rerouting freight through St. Louis Park, providing adequate room for LRT tracks in the Kenilworth corridor, rerouting the existing freight change through St. Louis Park and running out LRT through the Midtown corridor, or co-locating LRT, freight, and the pedestrian and bike trails at grade through the Kenilworth corridor. These 3 alternatives were subsequently rejected by the Met Council. Co-location in particular was found to be unacceptable as an option through the existing DEIS analysis, which concluded that co-location would not adequately preserve the environment or protect the quality of life it had. There were high construction-related impacts because of the complex construction staging required to rebuild the freight tracks. In sum, the DIS stated, because this draft DIS presented other feasible and prudent alternatives to co-location, this alternative cannot be recommended as the environmentally preferred alternative. And what we have in front of us today is a plan that is completely different than the one that was scoped in the DEIS. It suggests this concept of a shallow tunnel. But as many of you have heard through the testimony, the shallow tunnel has not had a complete environmental review. So we would be essentially taking an action today not knowing whether or not this shallow tunnel, which is to be built between 18 and 20 feet below the water level, will have an impact on our lakes and environment. We know the water level in this area is at about 9 feet. So it's not hard to surmise that there is potential major dewatering effects. And the only thing you need to do is look at 1,800 knocks in front of us in litigation currently, where 210,000 gallons of water are being dewatered into Lake Calhoun monthly. We felt so strongly about this as a council that we took action to sue the developer over that. And yet we are now facing a situation with no environmental review where the potential for dewatering is significant. It's not only dewatering, it's the loss of a massive amount of trees, it's the concern about gigantic crash walls, and maybe most notably to the park board, the fact that there will be a fairly substantial bridge built over the historic Kenilworth Channel. A bridge that we have no idea what the environmental effects will be, but we do know that the bridge is on the National Register as a historic landmark. So I really believe on the environmental issues alone, most of you should be voting no today. We also can't afford to allow this completely unequitable plan to move forward. This route fails to serve densely populated areas of Minneapolis and ignores areas of transit dependence in favor of suburban commuters. The Met Council's own numbers show us that less than 800 boardings or 400 round trips in stations that the activists describe as North Minneapolis would happen, yet thousands of boardings would happen in the suburban communities. I'm not sure how that serves our community and is equitable. Mass transit means mass numbers of riders. And in this particular situation, our decision should be based on the mass number of riders for Minneapolis, not the mass number of riders for the region or for the suburbs. This route has almost no economic development potential in our portion of the city. Hopefully in the neighborhood that I live in, Bryn Mawr, which I'll note is not North Minneapolis, where 2 of the stations are located, Penn and Van Wyck, we'll see some development in the Van Wyck area, and I've been a supporter of the Bassett Creek Master Plan for a long period of time, and I'm hopeful that this will spur development. But clearly there won't be any development at the 21st Street station. There isn't a lot of room for development at the West Lake Street station, and it's unknown at this point what will happen at Royalston. The equity plan produced by the Met Council is a complete joke. If we think that equity means maybe we might build some heated bus stops in North Minneapolis sometime in the future that we can't promise or guarantee and won't tell you where they'll be, then good for us for standing up for equity. If equity means that we might add some bus stops somewhere along the line that might feed to Penn Station that can't feed to the 21st Street station, then good for us. We've done a great job on encouraging that equity initiative. And equity has its risk. If there is a turnover in at the federal government, at the state government, we risk losing transit funding, not gaining transit funding. And who suffers when transit funding is pulled? People who are the most impacted. That's when bus shelters don't get built. That's when bus lines don't go forward. That's when they reduce service. Rail is fixed. It's going to be there. That's going to be a cost. Buses, in the end, we could find if there is a downturn in the economy or change in our elected officials, that we would not be able to move that forward. Madam President, do you want me to finish my comments with my last 5 minutes, or do you want me to stop now? And I'm conscious of the amount of time I have.
Why don't you come in later then? I think that makes sense. Councilmember Frye.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Every last thing that Councilmember Goodman just said is absolutely right. There have been broken promises along the way. There have been breached agreements. There's lack of an environmental review, and I can absolutely see why that's frustrating. You know, you have testimony from a senator from St. Louis Park saying that they would take the reroute of the freight. We had promises made that we wouldn't do co-location. I would be angry also. You know, if this were a train that were light rail that were built for density and serving an urban population, then it would go down Lindale or Hennepin up through Uptown. If this were light rail that was built for our diverse populations and aimed at narrowing the opportunity gap, then it would go through North Minneapolis. So I would entirely understand if some of my colleagues from North Minneapolis would be voting against this project. That being said, what it also does is it reinforces Minneapolis, and specifically the downtown where I represent, as the center of our region. And along with that, even if this is only a high-speed rail from the suburbs to the downtown, that piece does help our downtown. And what we need now is for the Met Council to step up royally to ensure that some of these equity pieces are met. And I will be voting yes today, and it is predominantly for the overarching impact of light rail and what that can do for a city long term. But, you know, let's be exceedingly clear. There are a whole lot of negatives as well.
Councilmember Glidden.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I will be voting yes on this project today. I really appreciate to all of my colleagues. I know this is, frankly, I think this is one of the most difficult votes or projects to kind of consider all the impacts that I have voted on in my time on the council. I think we're all trying to look to the future and do the right thing. But we're also operating in a reality that this is a regional project. We didn't choose this route, but we are part of a region and where we have a vote on a project team, and this was the route that was chosen. We also didn't choose the timing of our vote. So I have no disagreement with anything that Councilmember Goodman has said or many other residents have said about the importance of the DEIS. But we are right now in a process, in a timeline, and if we do not comply with that timeline, then we are in essence giving up some of our rights as a city to vote on this project or try to make sure that it's the best project that could serve our residents. It's clear we have waited too long in this region to build the rail infrastructure that we need for Minnesota and for the metropolitan region. We are just woefully behind. And what I support and why I support this project is I support a light rail system. I support a transit system that I believe will better serve us as a region and as a city. And for this investment to be successful, and let's be clear, it is a very large investment. We need for there to be good connections. We need for there to be good service. We need there to be better commitments from the Met Council on how that will be done, how our neighborhoods will be served, and how will they support us on projects that serve not just that spine, but connect into the neighborhoods that are Minneapolis, South and North Minneapolis, where we have dense urban neighborhoods that Southwest avoided. I think that I have approached this with trying to look for what is the best way to protect Minneapolis assets. I think others know that I was part of a process to be part of that conversation with the Met Council and with Hennepin County to work with those entities to ensure that there would be maintained public ownership of rail, which I think is critical. We have talked about that. To talk also about critical design aspects along the Kenilworth corridor. This does not erase the impacts or the concerns, but I think this was being responsible and trying to make sure that this project would be the best that it could be. Again, I think our work is not done here. It is hugely critical that we're able to work with the Met Council. I'll note that I just saw in the newspaper the other day that Met Council was investing in how light rail would have a pedestrian bridge into the Viking Stadium. And I'm not saying maybe that's quite important to make sure there's safety for those residents in terms of crossing the light rail line, lots of people at one time. But it also says to me, when we identify things that are important, we can find a way to make sure that those proper investments are made. And I kind of question the prioritization of that announcement when we have also just had released a report that talks about the need to better invest in the core of the bus service, in the amenities and the shelters and the security around those. Again, I really want to thank residents in Minneapolis. I have heard from many, and I will tell you that I have been reading your correspondence. I have been listening to your correspondence. I have not yet been able to respond to the vast amount of correspondence, but I have been doing that, and I respect your views. And I thank you all for speaking up about your views. I think this has been a process that has really, unfortunately, kind of pitted us into haves and have-nots here. And I think that's regretful about how the process has happened. But thank you all for your respectful participation. And again, I will be supporting this project.
Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I want to say thank you to Councilmember Glidden, Councilmember Reich, the Mayor's Office, Peter Wagenia specifically, for sitting on the body that has been digging deep and looking at some of these issues and putting together some of these recommendations. I, too, have received many emails from many different people on this issue, and I do feel it makes me frustrated and sad to be in a situation where we do have to choose between two very different communities that feel like they're impacted in different ways by this specific project. And one of the things that I'm weighing into consideration very heavily right now is this piece of equity that Councilmember Goodman opened up with. What are we trying to define as equity through this project? And just this week, I met with a few residents who feel like the city is not really taking equity seriously. Like we're just talking about it. Talking was the meme that they shared with me because they don't really see how this language is being mirrored in concrete investments in our communities. And so they feel like we've co-opted their language. And I think that this particular project provides us the opportunity to really deliver on what we mean by equity. And I absolutely want to see East Lake Street benefit from this project. I absolutely think the cultural corridors of our community must be tied to this project. And if I support this today, that is my expectation, that West Broadway, Cedar Riverside, East Franklin, and East Lake are closely aligned to whatever it is that we're doing with this, because if we're looking at transportation from a regional perspective, if we're looking at Southwest as a regional project, then absolutely the equity concerns must go above and beyond heated shelters in North Minneapolis. It has to go deeper. It has to look at infrastructure. It has to look at investments in our businesses, in our communities of color. It has to look at ways to anchor the small grassroots organizations that have been fighting for social justice for the last 30 to 40 years. Thank you.
Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam President. I know that most of my constituents in the dense and transit-oriented neighborhoods of the Uptown area in Ward 10 would have strongly preferred an alignment that served our neighborhoods. This train is not directly serving our Minneapolis neighborhoods. It's a train that's designed to give suburban commuters a fast ride into downtown. But an Uptown option isn't on the table today. It hasn't been on the table since 2009. We can blame Bush-era funding requirements for that, but the truth is that our whole regional LRT system has been designed in the same way. This train, our LRT system, only makes sense if we build the transit connections needed to directly serve our urban neighborhoods. This isn't about Minneapolis versus the suburbs. The only way to build a successful, economically competitive, and environmentally sustainable region is to have strong transit connections in our region's urban core. If I believe that voting no today would give us better transit service in the future in our city, I would take that vote. I'm voting yes today because I believe that the Southwest Light Rail train is the first step toward giving our neighborhoods the best transit system in the region. But we need stronger commitment from Hennepin County, from the Metropolitan Council, from the governor's office, from the legislature to make that happen. The regional and state partners that have been pushing so hard for this train have not made a commitment to building our local transit system. And those are the connections that we must have to make this train work. I'm disappointed that we're voting today on an incomplete system that does not serve urban neighborhoods, that we are relying on hope and our own hard work to make that happen. I will be working hard along with Council Vice President Glidden, with TPW Chair Kevin Reich, with the leaders of our council, with our mayor who've been pushing so hard for those commitments in the past to make this a reality. But we shouldn't have to fight so hard. We should absolutely not have to fight for bus shelters in North Minneapolis. We shouldn't have to fight for the transit connections to serve Central City neighborhoods. And we should not have to fight to protect the lakes and the regional bike trail that are regional assets. I'm very disappointed and frustrated and concerned that we do not have a supplemental draft EIS today as we vote on this package before us. We don't have an option today of voting yes with conditions. We only have a choice of voting yes or no. So I put together, along with the mayor's office and my colleagues, the strongest staff direction that we could come up with to make a very clear statement that we will stop this train if it threatens our cities and our region's environmental resources and the chains of lakes. And I just want to read that staff direction. The city and attorney and the director of public works are directed to monitor the progress of the supplemental draft environmental impact statement for the Southwest Light Rail train line and to update the city council with new information or in the event of further delays. The current date of release of the SDEIS is estimated by the Metropolitan Council is January 2015. If the SDEIS process or other reliable environmental studies reveal new information that predicts a reasonable possibility of previously unknown or previously undisclosed detrimental effects on the city's waters, either direct or indirect, caused by the Southwest Light Rail project, the city attorney, in consultation with the city engineer and the city environmental staff, is directed to promptly present to the city council a report setting out the potential legal actions to protect the city's environmental assets, including initiating or joining ongoing litigation initiated by others, regardless of whether any of the potential actions might have the effect of halting the Southwest Light Rail project. Thank you.
Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, Madam President. And I thought it was important that I also weigh in here. Obviously, there's significant support on the council for this, as I'm just counting the votes, but there's also, even among the supporters, a lot of conflict and a lot of division. And I think that reflects the conflict and division that we see in the community over this issue. I have been very conflicted myself. I have to say that I've been working the last few weeks, months maybe, very hard on figuring out how I can get to yes. Months and months ago, I did clue everybody about how I could get to yes, probably over a year ago, and the relocation of the freight was key. The City Council unanimously said, we'll accept the alignment as long as you remove the freight, and then we'll work on getting a project done that everybody can like. That didn't happen. So that was one of the big issues that could have got me to yes. I want to get to yes because I actually support light rail. I think we have to build out the system. I think that we need a regional perspective. I think we have to move much more quickly in showing preferences to non-auto traffic in our region and in our city. We've spent decades and decades and decades building for cars, giving preference for cars, giving subsidies to people who have their automobiles and want to drive them. And it's time we start offering some incentives and subsidies to people who want to be auto-free, because I think that's how the city's really going to work in the future and be better. So I'm supportive of this. I also I'm supportive of alignments that use old rail corridors because there are less conflicts. So I got to about this far from yes, and have decided that my role here and serving the council better and the community better is to use my vote to express the concerns and the reservations, because they are significant. I think we're getting a project here that's incomplete. The work isn't done. We've already heard about the environmental assessment and the impact statement. It's not completed and it's not done, and I think that it should be, and we could use that. I will say I enthusiastically support the staff direction that we just heard from Councilmember Bender. I think that's key. I also support the memorandum of understanding. So there's actually 3 items before us today that I'll be voting yes on. But on municipal consent, I'm going to use my position to vote no. I'm going to stand with Councilmember Goodman, because I think the process is flawed. What we want to get when something comes to the council here is something that has the buy-in from the community. We have serious divisions. Some of my greatest allies and friends out in the community are supporting this wholeheartedly, and that makes it more of a conflict for me. But we have others like the Minneapolis Park Board that still has concerns. They still have objections to this plan that's coming forward, and others are divided around it. I think we need that environmental impact statement. And what's really strange is it's been drafted. There's a bunch of information in some document somewhere, and it's been sent far away to another governmental body. How's that for working together and being good partners when another governmental body here, who's dealing with this issue right at home, can't even see that information? The federal government is holding a draft EIS and won't let us look at the draft, even say, it's just a draft, we haven't finished, but have a look at it so you can make a good decision, council member. We want you to make the best decision for your people. Instead, they're holding on to it, and we have to wait until after we take this significant vote to find out if they're going to see concerns about this shallow tunnel in the water. And these are the lakes, and these are significant, and even if there's not much else, but somebody starts to look at maybe this timeline process of how we do environmental impact statements doesn't have to be replicated for Bottineau. Maybe we need to modify this so that the decision makers can actually have the information. Then my no vote would have been worth something. But I also have really big concerns about other issues too. Another one is equity. We talk about the equity plan. What are we going to do to make sure that this works for others? And I don't think we've got a good resolution for that. We've made some progress. We're moving in that direction. But a unanimous or a 12-1 vote for the council saying, hey, we think that the Met Council's response to the equity issues is good enough and we're getting enough for North Minneapolis and others with this, so we'll vote yes. I don't think that's good enough. I think we need some council members, and I'm willing to be one of them, to say we need to see more to make sure that this works. This is serving certain people and not others. And part of that is actually making sure that the access to this transit works for everybody. I think there were opportunities for the Met Council along the way to say, we will absolutely be your partner in building out a streetcar system so we can reach the dense areas of our city and bring them into LRT. We will absolutely work and invest so that we can make sure that there are the kind of bus services and shelters and amenities that will lead into this, and I hope that we will continue. You know, I'm supporting the other actions here, and I just want to note here that I think that by joining a few of my colleagues, and maybe it's one colleague so far as I'm counting, but we have a few more speeches to go, and maybe there'll be others. But I hope that I can use that to show that it's not unanimous here. I'm hoping it can help send a signal to the Met Council and to the community that my concerns here are serious. And actually, I think I'm also providing a service to my colleagues who are voting yes, because I think they also share these concerns, and I'm better reflecting the actual opinion of the City Council by doing this. But also, maybe by looking at how flawed the system is here, we can make sure that next line we build, and the more transit that we're building out, we can make sure that issues of environmental impact, equity, and transit access can be answered before it comes to the City Council and other decision makers there, and we can have a better process. I hope we learn these lessons and we learn from this experience, and that by expressing these concerns broadly and sharing them, it'll make sure that Bottineau goes better and other lines will go better, and we'll have a commuter rail that's going to work better for our city, and streetcars, and also that we'll be take greater care on working to preserve and even improve our parks and lakes. And maybe because of this no vote, we'll actually do a better job building Southwest, because I'd be happy and delighted to see active engagement from here on in, because I'm sure this is going to pass, and actually even if we voted no, I suspect the Met Council would move forward with building this line, because we can't actually stop it. But now, if it goes forward, let's make sure that we have issues of preserving and protecting the environment, building equity into this, and transit access to the line for everybody as top priorities, and prove me wrong and make sure that it all works better.
Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam President. And much has been said that I could easily echo in terms of the conflict and frustration of trying to make an alignment that was not in any way, shape, or form consistent with what we had suggested would be a good alignment for our city. However, and because we know what we want, we have a system in our Access Minneapolis plan that's very clear about how we serve our communities and how any given line goes through the framework of a system. And the lines are judged by how they support the system. And because we have a very clear sense of that as a city and in policy and through our staff work, we recognize deficiencies quickly. We're very articulate and consistent with deficiencies in any line serving a system. We're also very clear and very impatient when we have a very sense of the direction we want to go with our lines and our system in serving communities when those expectations aren't being met. We get impatient with not having the partners to move that forward clearly, consistently, and with a sense of course they will be our good partners. Of course they will follow along the agreements that we set forth today. We don't have that sense of course because of the nature of the line as it was presented to us. However, working with my colleagues, we do have the work before us. Councilmember Glidden Bender has made it very clear that the work is before us. We may not like that place, but we have to move forward. I think we've put together some reassurances in terms of if things don't go right environmentally, we have a process to come back and review. We also have other areas in which there's significant deviations from the line that they have to come back for review and an additional vote. So there are some safeties in there. However, those assurances are very pale compared to the concerns of a community that sees promise after promise broken in terms of what our expectations are. So it's not a very good place moving forward. We know the work before us. We just really call upon the partners to be partners to make a system that works for communities. And we need to start now.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam President. So I'm overall supportive of this project. I think it's good for Minneapolis. I think it's good for the region, but I don't think it's great in terms of how it's been designed or the process around it. if I believed that there was a serious threat to the water, the groundwater, or our chain of lakes, I would emphatically be voting no today. This land is within the Minnehaha watershed district. I have talked to the Minnehaha watershed district about this, and they have said that the impact they are expecting from this is so negligible, at least as it is currently designed, that they would not be able to measure it because the difference in annual rainfalls from one year to another would be greater than the impact to the groundwater levels. And so I want to make that very clear, that I know the water quality is a very important issue to all residents, to city council members, and all indications from the current design are that this is going to have no serious impact at this point with the engineering and the designs. But I want to take a moment to channel the park board, who isn't here today, and say that a lot of residents have nature deficit disorder. We need calm places, spaces within our city, and we're lucky, we're fortunate. We have the best park system in the nation. But even though it's the best park system in the nation, that shouldn't stop us from doing more. And in this case, Southwest Light Rail going through Kenilworth is going to have, I think, a negative impact on the recreational experience for park users. And that is a cost for transit, and that is a trade-off. And it is a serious reservation that I have, and I know others have, because we've gone down that corridor. We enjoy it, whether that is kayaking down the channel or our bike rides or just the beauty and the nature that is along that corridor and along Cedar Lake. And so I think we need to be really cognizant of that in our process, because we do have all of these great spaces, but our parks can't be the easy answer. You know, it can't be so easy to take a space shared by all of us that we're also trying to do as much as we can to protect for the next generation, and so easily and readily say, okay, well, this is going to be easier than the costs or the challenges of going through a more densely populated area. And we have that coming before us as well with the Botanu light rail line, with the plans to potentially put that through Theodore Wirth Park. And so we need to be conscious of that. We need to work right now proactively to make sure that that process is fair to the environment, is fair to the experience of our park users, because their perspectives matter and it's important within this. And we can't always be taking away from our parks without giving back. And I know that we have gone to some lengths as well in other spaces to restore and protect and add on to our parks. So that's a positive step as well. And finally, I just want to say it's not lost on me the burden to residents from this project. In fact, we make a lot of decisions like that. If I know there's, for instance, residential developments that are 4 stories high, and you put it next to somebody, a landowner who now all of a sudden they don't have sun coming in and hitting their yard, and their trees die, and now they have a tower of apartment windows overlooking their backyard, and their sense of privacy, their sense of their backyard, their place is irrevocably changed. And I know that's going to happen for some of the residents along Kenilworth Trail, along this corridor. And even though there's been agreements about relocating freight and doing this and that, I think a lot of folks who have purchased their homes there, they were not expecting this. It was not a reasonable expectation for them to have that this quiet, serene corridor that they were attracted to, that was one of the reasons why they bought their house, that would be turned into a train running through their backyard every few minutes, potentially at some times of the day. And I just really want to call that out, because there are people that are losing with this project, and they are taking on a burden, and I don't think it's talked about enough. And all of the park users as well face that as this corridor that so many of us love is bound to change. It still will be a great recreational corridor, but it will be changed as a result of this project. So thank you.
Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a series of random thoughts here, but hopefully folks will follow with me. Councilmember Andrew Johnson mentioned the Botno line, and a lot of the arguments that are going to be thrown out here today with regards to Southwest LRT are going to be the same arguments that will be present in the Botno line. And I hope people will be as strong in their advocacy for Botno. I will just go on record saying that I'm not a huge fan of the current alignment as is, because Councilmember Andrew Johnson mentioned all the impacts that it will have on their environments going through Thilworth Parkway and the park. That being said, the issue of equity, when people talk about equity, I mean, I would certainly hope that, running a train on Penn Avenue would be a much better option, and it would hit a lot more people, and it would serve a lot more people. And yet, I think folks feel like we're so far down the road that we just can't go back. And in this situation, that's kind of what we're doing as well. I mean, just feeling like it's a little bit too late down the road. The equity concerns, to me, on the surface, I have to say, I mean, I was struck by what Julie Sable said. I mean, I think what she said in her article about the Southwest LRT line not being an equity train, I think she's right on the surface. I think, all the things that she said is correct. And, I think, with this line, I think what we want to do is we want to be hopeful for the future, and we want to be hopeful so that good things will happen and equity will happen. And, part of me is a bit hopeful, but part of me feels like, it may not be realized. And, we don't know until we build it. And that's a huge concern of mine. But, I'm hopeful that it will serve the folks I represent in Ward 5. When a lot of people talk about North Minneapolis, they're talking about Ward 4 and 5. And I guess I would say, Ward 5 is as close as it gets to being close to Southwest LRT, and it's still a little bit away. The other thing I want to mention is when we talk about this divisiveness, I want to just let people know that for me, I've been very impressed and just struck by just how amazing the folks that are the Kenwood folks, or the folks people call NIMBYs, have been. And, I don't think they're NIMBY at all. I think, what they are doing is exactly what they should be doing, which is to advocate strongly for what they believe is right for them. And, I think that's a political process. People are supposed to advocate strongly for what they believe in. And so, from what I've seen of the folks from Kenwood or from the folks in Ward 7 is, a lot of the folks were very civil in this debate. They were very thoughtful, and they did everything they could to, bring this conversation to a new level and a better level. And so I appreciate that, and I want them to understand that that's really important that they did that. My fourth random thought, and I'll leave it at this, is that, today, I have reservations about this vote, especially about not having the SDEIS before making an informed vote, and environmental impacts on the Kenilworth area. However, as our city attorney said, some of these issues might be better left to the courts to decide. And so today, I'm making a political vote in favor of municipal consent, understanding that a lawsuit might be coming. Thank you.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to bring up something that was removed ultimately from our municipal consent whereases today, and it's in there, the Bush era transit funding formula, and how that is one aspect that has challenged this project from a very long time ago. But I think it's missing a little bit of the good news that shortly after the Kenilworth alignment was chosen, the Obama administration announced it was changing the formula, citing in part the difficulty in building that central LRT line with sufficient stations in an urban corridor. To me, this project and its success is really about stations and station planning. It really is about safety and circulation and connection to other kinds of transit. It also means a lot to be said for pedestrian improvements. Yes, at Westlake Station, but in each of these places, there is opportunity for this to be made so much better. So I do think one positive result of the mediation process was $30 million for these station area improvements. I know that that benefits some places better than others right now, but I think the ultimate formula no longer being biased against urban areas is yet to be seen here in this project. I'm an environmentalist long before I was ever a politician, and I'm extremely familiar with this corridor. I used it 10 years ago when it looked a lot different than it does today. It's very hard for me to suggest that some of this space would go back to what it was. And I am voting in favor of this project for a lot of the reasons my colleagues have mentioned, but I just want to also bring up the point that the good news in the funding arrangement is yet to be seen, that I'm very thankful for what has come out of the mediation, and that I think we have some more work to do. Thanks.
Madam Mayor.
I'm happy to yield the floor to Councilmember Goodman if she wishes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam President. I was very touched by a lot of the comments that have been brought up today, in particular the comments by Councilmember Yang with regard to my constituents. It's very painful for so many people who live in the city to feel marginalized in a way that they really shouldn't. And ironically, at the public meeting that we had at Ann Watton, the voice of reason was Al Flowers, who got up and said, we shouldn't be bashing each other. We should be talking about how we all can benefit from this, and I appreciate your comments, Councilmember Yang, because I think you eloquently described the frustration that we feel with regard to the way that a lot of people in this area have been treated. Ultimately, this is about what we can afford and what we can't afford. And what we can't afford, in my opinion, is the self-inflicted damage of this alignment, surrendering to pressures for us to act against our own city's best interest. Sadly, I think this has been about the suburbs and everyone ganging up on Minneapolis. All of the votes that have happened at the higher levels have left Mayor Rybeck standing alone and Mayor Hodges standing alone against a united front of people who really want to make sure they stick it to us. And our response to that is to say, okay, well, we'll move forward even if it's not in our best interests. I do want to note that I don't think we need to reinforce Minneapolis as the center of our region. I thought that's what the Vikings vote was about, reinforcing Minneapolis as the center of the region. And I'm glad that it was brought up that there's going to be several $1 million spent on a staircase to get from the rail plaza into the Vikings stadium. That's probably a couple of million that could have been spent to heat bus shelters right now. So we kind of know what the priority is with regard to the Met Council in terms of where they put their money. I will say that the pressures from all these different levels to focus on the region instead of our city are really distressing. We have created this kind of self-inflicted damage by looking at the regional implications over the environmental stewardship, over the equity concerns, and over our own best interests. This isn't about the fact that my constituents can't afford this through their beloved neighborhood, the Cedar Lake Park, and the Kenilworth Trail System. It's about what we can't afford as a city, the environmental risk, the lack of real equity, and the government failures to keep up with promises that were made. Minneapolis isn't responsible for Southwest LRT planning failures. Our responsibility is to demand the promises made be kept, to make sure that serious environmental and community and livability concerns be fairly, legally, and thoughtfully addressed. Our city should expect and receive no less. This plan and process has failed. This is government at its worst, and this plan with this council should fail as well.
Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, Madam President, and I just wanted to add a couple comments that I didn't have time for before. The first one is I want to express my sincere gratitude to the council members who participated in the mediation in those discussions, and to the mayor and to the mayor's office. And I wanted to be clear that any of my criticism of where that landed had nothing to do with your participation in that, and it was outstanding, and I think you moved things in a very helpful and better direction. And the last comment I wanted to make is a little bit more general, and it's reaching outside of this, and maybe is in that category of lessons learned for the future. But this whole thing has made me wonder more and wonder once again, how different would this look if it was an elected Met Council and the members had to answer to the people and the residents of the city instead of an appointed Met Council whose membership answers to the governor?
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam President. The City of Minneapolis, we have long been champions for transit. We have long been regional partners, understanding that the needs of the communities in this region are intertwined with the needs of the core city. That is an understanding not understood by all of our regional partners, but we have forged ahead regardless on many projects, and that includes Southwest LRT. The support that there is today for municipal consent comes in the face of broken promises, mistakes made in the past, a set of current constraints that have forced our hand. It has led to a high cost for the city of Minneapolis and for our residents, and for a Kenilworth corridor that, in the words of Governor Dayton, the correct words of Governor Dayton, will never be the same. The core broken promise, of course, was the promise that freight would be moved. The constraints we face include the process that has happened, a region that does not value, in all cases, the value that the core cities bring to the region, the cumulative impact of past process failures of Hennepin County and the Met Council. The mistakes, as outlined in the resolution that are here, all come down to the fundamental mistake of not having written things down, of not having binding agreements, of not having votes and signatures on that votes that would hold everyone's feet to the fire about the promises that had been made. The city didn't make these mistakes. The city cannot correct these mistakes. But this time, even though we had to fight for them, we have obtained written, binding agreements on issues that are critical to the city. There's not going to be a celebration. There's going to be no victory lap on this one. But in the face of these constraints, these agreements are the most responsible way that we have forward. And I appreciate the support that there is for this responsible path, but I understand the objections to it as well. But make no mistake, this vote today is not a vote for or about equity. That's not what is at stake here. The Met Council characterized this as an equity train. But that is beyond inaccurate. That is beyond inaccurate. Until the Met Council makes concrete decisions and takes action on those decisions, this is a train, but by no means is it an equity train. The Met Council alignments leaves our densest and most transit-dependent communities behind. That is true. And the Met Council has yet to make concrete commitments to those communities and to this line that would bring equity to those communities and to this line. They have been happy to say that they will have a process to talk about potential actions that might have an impact on equity if they decide someday to put them on the table. My advocacy moving forward will be aimed at the people who can take action here, the Met Council, to make sure that they make as strong commitments to equity, written down, voted upon, and committed to as they should. But as I said when I started, we have been champions, long champions of transit here. And the mistakes of the past that the city did not make, but the city has to contend with, included things not being written down. And what we have here are responsibly written down binding agreements on some of the core things the city needs. And that is the responsible path forward. Because without that, we would have a project without those agreements in place. Thanks.
Any further discussion on item 8 on the Transportation Public Works report? Seeing none, I just really want to comment on, I remember serving on the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission probably, I suppose it was maybe 25 years ago, when the Cedar Lake Park advocates came in to ask that that piece of railroad land that nobody saw a useful use for at the time, except for development, be brought into the park system. And Minneapolis had it Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board didn't have it on their agenda, and the Three Rivers Park District, which had a different name at the time, said, why would anybody want, they wanted to extend into St. Louis Park, and they said at the time, why would anybody want to take a ride out, next to a railroad? Well, it was before people realized the value of parks and trails. And I think part of the problem that we have with our system is that, and I'm thinking in the broadest context, is that it just takes too long from the decision-making time about creating an alignment to when it actually gets implemented. If you think about how long this Southwest line has been discussed and looked at, in that time, the whole area around Highway 100, the West End development, that's all been created since this alignment was picked. And it just takes so long from the decision about where it's going to go to actually implementing it that the whole landscape changes. And I think that's part of our problem. And so I think we're looking at this system very, very piecemeal. It was so interesting to me to have the Met Council come to our committee and talk about their equity plan and understand that the people that ride transit right now in North Minneapolis and the densely concentrated parts of South Minneapolis actually provide the huge basis of funding for the Metro Transit system. And we aren't getting the services, even out of that very basic bus system that's been in existence for a really long time. So I'm just very concerned that this is a piecemeal approach, and we aren't getting out of it what we could. And I understand the need for light rail to be efficient. I get that. My colleague, Councilmember Robert Lilligren, really schooled me in that. And I think we're seeing some of the challenges if we have a system with the Central Corridor right now that is with a lot of stops. It makes for excessive time to actually get through the route, which diminishes the effectiveness of going from one city to the next. So I just think we have real challenges, and Councilmember Reich is so right about we need to understand the scope of the system and what our citizens need for the dollars that they have put in and will continue to put in to the dollars that are collected through property tax and the transit tax that is levied across counties in this community, because we're not getting the fair shake out of the dollars that we're putting in. So I won't be supporting this today, but I want to say that I very much respect all the work that my colleagues have done and the thoughtful consideration that they have put into this process, and particularly Councilmember Glidden and Councilmember Reich for sitting through and making sure, as the mayor said, that we have signed documents that are able to be looked back and held accountable when this project moves forward. And that was a huge step, and I really appreciate the work that was done, and Mr. Wagenius from the mayor's office. So clerk will call the roll on item 8.
Councilmember Warsame.
Aye.
Goodman.
No.
Fry.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
So pardon me, but I'm slightly confused. I would like to vote aye on A, B, and C, and no on D, if we're voting on all of the items in item 8.
No, you wouldn't.
Does that make sense?
Councilmember Kano.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Glidden.
Aye.
Yang.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Quincy.
Aye.
President Johnson.
No.
On item 8A, there are 11 ayes and 2 nays. On item C, I have 11 ayes and 2 nays. On item D, I have 11 ayes and 2 nays, correct?
I think there was only one council member that asked to be recorded as aye on one of the items and nay on the rest.
Could I clarify?
Councilmember Gordon?
Yeah, it's the, I guess it's item A that's municipal consent that I'm voting no on? I think the
No,
order-
actually, item B is municipal consent.
Well, it depends on which sheet you're looking at. So I would like to vote, can I just,
Yep.
I would like to vote yes on authorizing execution of the memorandum of understanding between the city and the Metropolitan Council on the proposed redesign on a portion of Southwest Light Rail. Oh, no, I guess that's the, is that the municipal consent, Mr. Clerk?
Ms.
Thank
Siegel?
you. I'm getting, yeah. So I'd like to vote yes on that. I'd like to vote no on the passage of the resolution approving the physical design component. And I'd like to vote aye on the city attorney, the direction to the city attorney and director of public works to monitor the progress of the SDEIS. And I would like to vote aye on the other staff direction to the intergovernmental relations department to convene appropriate staff from public works.
Madam President, do I have Councilmember Gordon voting nay on A and B?
No.
He said aye on A, right?
Gordon is an aye. On
Sorry,
A,
everyone.
And on B?
Well, then feed.
B?
B, I'm voting no.
No.
Aye on all the rest.
Aye on everything else. 4, 5. So this would become 12, 1. So if I have this correct, on item 8A, then I should have 11 ayes and 2 nays.
Who's the other nay? I'm sorry.
Councilmember Goodman.
Oh, okay.
On item 8B, I have 11 ayes and 2 nays. Is that correct?
And the three.
Goodman and Gordon?
And Johnson.
And Johnson, 3.
10-3. On item C, I have 12 ayes and 2 nays.
3 nays.
3 nays and
No.
I'm sorry. I'm not interested. This resolution is going to pass, and so I'm not interested in necessarily being recorded as not supporting the other items. So
on item C, I have 10 ayes and 3 nays.
yes.
And on item D, I have 12 ayes and 1 nay. Goodman is my 1 nay on D.
I'm sorry, Mr. Clerk.
I have 12 ayes on number 8D, with Goodman voting no.
I am voting no on everything. Yes. Thank you. I am voting no on everything. This item is not going to pass.
So 11,
Everything is 11 to 2.
11-2,
Except B is 10 to 3.
10-3, 11-2, 10-3, 11-2, 11-2. So on A, 11-2, on B, 10-3, on C, 11-2, and on D, 11-2.
That item is approved.
Okay.
Next, we have the Ways and Means report with that committee's chair, Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam President. We have Madam President, Ways and Means brings forward 8 items for our consideration today. They are a series of legal settlements, a waiver of conflict of interest for legal services, audio-video equipment donation, acceptance of a low bid for recycling project, waste recycling project at the Convention Center, a records management system RFP issuance, acceptance of 3 gifts to attend a technology conference, the passage of the second quarter gift acceptance report, and the authorization to enter into agreements with 5 firms for investment management services. Happy to move all 8 items for consideration.
Councilmember Quincy has moved the Ways and Means report. Any discussion on any of those items? Anyone want to pull anything off? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Warsame.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Fry.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Glidden. Yang.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Quincy.
Aye.
President Johnson.
Aye on all items except no on item 8.
There are 12 ayes and 1 nay on item number 8 and 13 ayes on the remainder of the report.
That report is adopted. Next, we have the Zoning and Planning Committee report with that committee's chair, Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam President. We have 2 items to forward from the Zoning and Planning Committee. The first is zoning code amendments regarding 1 to 4 unit residential developments to create new regulations to regulate the size of those buildings, along with the staff direction that was brought forward by Councilmember Palmisano to direct staff to study methods related to green building deconstruction. The second item is at 1121 Fillmore Street Northeast to approve a rezoning from R1A to R3 to allow an office to be converted into a third dwelling unit, and I will forward both items.
Councilmember Bender has moved the Zoning and Planning report. Anyone want to pull anything off or any discussion on either of those items? Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you. I'd like to pull off item 1 just to say a few words.
Why don't you go ahead?
Thanks. I want to make clear that what's before you today is the final step of zoning amendments that will apply to 1 to 4 unit residential buildings, and it will work in combination with the construction management agreement that we voted on in the CD and Reg agenda, and also the toolkit for neighbors of new construction for better regulation of residential construction, improved processes, and better outcomes for homes in every ward. There's been extensive input from stakeholders, hundreds of residents, neighborhood focus groups, builders, real estate professionals, architect groups, city staff, and my council colleagues here that began back in March. I think it produces a very long list of modest changes that in aggregate create for better urban development. These strike a fair balance between the preferences and the needs of both existing residents and home builders and new homeowners. As you all know, this process began when I introduced a moratorium on infill construction in some of the neighborhoods in the 13th Ward. This process, including the council process, took approximately 6 months. I'm pleased to report that since this time, since some of these other measures have been put in place, we've shown significant increase in compliance. There's a lot less calls to my office, to 311, to 911 because of these kinds of issues. I want to note also that if there are things that require tweaking in the near future, we'll do that. If we find that these provisions we haven't gotten right or are causing problems, we don't have to live with these problems for years. We can and will fix them. I thank you also for the staff direction support. I think that this is part of the environmental aspect of what it is we're trying to do here. And just want to thank everyone that participated in this process, especially my office staff, Emily and Ken. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to quickly say, I've seen this issue at many zoning and planning commission hearings, and I just wanted to commend Councilmember Palmisano, which has really hit a good middle ground here. I think I said this in Committee of the Whole, that the planning commission hearing was very non-controversial with a lot of support from all of the different stakeholders. And I can say that the Ward 13 constituents have an incredibly hardworking and conscientious council member in Councilmember Palmisano.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Warsame.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Fry.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Glidden. Yang.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Quincy.
Aye.
President Johnson.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That report is adopted. Next, we have resolutions, and the first is an honorary resolution declaring September 20th, 2014 to be Faith Lodge Day, and that allows 35W Bridge to be lit. Any discussion on that resolution? Seeing none, all in approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. We also have an honorary resolution, which we presented at the beginning of the meeting, recognizing the week of September 8th, 2014 as Cooperatives Week. Any discussion on that resolution? Seeing none, all in approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. And we have the honorary resolution also that was presented before the council meeting honoring Community Gardening Day in Minneapolis. Any discussion on that resolution? Seeing none, all in approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Under motions, we have two motions actually by Councilmember Palmisano to amend the Committee of the Whole report adopted August 1st, 2014 to correct the term of Scott Neal's appointment to the Committee on the Audit to be a 3-year term beginning January 1, 2014 and ending December 31, 2016, and also a motion by Councilmember Palmisano requesting unanimous consent be given to introduce an ordinance amending the code relating to administration, Finance Department for first reading to correct the term of the converted mayoral appointment to expire December 31, 2015, and the term of the council appointment to expire December 31, 2016, and that said ordinance be given its second reading for amendment and passage. Any discussion on those items on the audit committee? Seeing none, all in approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. We have unanimous consent. Under new business, notice of intent is given by Councilmember Andrew Johnson and Councilmember Fry to give notice of intent to introduce at the next meeting of the City Council the subject matter of an ordinance amending the code relating to licenses and business regulations, courtesy benches, amending regulations on the number and implementation of courtesy benches. That notice is given. Also on notice of intent, Councilmember Bender gives notice of intent to introduce at the next regular meeting of the City Council the subject matter of an ordinance amending the code relating to sidewalks, streets and sidewalk block events, reforming and streamlining block event conditions and restrictions to increase permit attainability and compliance. That notice is given. Next, we have announcements. Anyone have any announcements? Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Madam President. Just two brief announcements. First is part of our primary election, we had a recount that was triggered by Mr. Mann. Mr. Mann was one of the candidates for the school board. In the end, he picked up 1 vote. But still ranked 5th overall in the results of the at-large race for the school board. Those unofficial results will be canvassed by the school board tomorrow afternoon. The top 4 vote getters will advance to the November 4th election. If nothing else, today's recount really demonstrated the accuracy of our tabulators and voting system software. A physical hand count of 29,129 ballots resulted in a net change of 1. That's pretty awesome. So huge thanks to Grace and her whole team. Clearly they did a great job. And secondly, given sort of the depressed atmosphere in here right now, it really doesn't feel like a Friday. I wanted to give one announcement for this weekend, which is a really cool event that's happening on the roof of Brits. We will have Olympic caliber pole vaulters pole vaulting on the lawn that is normally used for bowling. So we've brought these guys and gals in, and you should definitely swing by. It'll be happening all day, but the real elites will be going around 7 p.m.
Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to top pole vaulting, but I can't. So I will end with my annual encouragement for council members and the community in general to attend the annual Monarch Festival. This is done in conjunction with the Minneapolis Park Board and the Nokomis East Neighborhood Association. It is on Saturday, September 6th from 10 to 4 in sunny Ward 11 at the Nokomis Community Center on Lake Nokomis.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to wish everyone a happy and safe Labor Day weekend.
Yeah. All right. With that, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved. Second.
All in approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.